the country as a whole is not performing too bad, given the problems that we are highlighting from declining service delivery in municipalities. But notwithstanding all that, the financial setup in the country, I know the sort of GDP problem that Sam was talking about is cause for concern. But generally, if you look at the markets in South Africa, they're not performing too bad from a financial angle.
Sure. So I think the economy and the markets, there is a bit of a disconnect slightly. From an economic perspective, it's been stable. So we've had at least some stability in terms of a couple of key areas. Firstly, inflation has been relatively stable now for the past year or so. Last numbers came out around 3%. And the governor is still targeting, although he's been under a bit of pressure, I see, from the ANC, in terms of talking about a target of around 3%, or the lower end of his 3 to 6%, where historically they were looking at the 4.5% of the midpoint as the target. But nonetheless, inflation has been relatively stable. The economy has been okay. It's been pedaling along. Still, we're still under, a percent type of GDP growth, and that you cannot, to generate jobs, which unemployment remains the biggest issue and biggest challenge for the country, you need to generate in excess of 3-4% per annum GDP growth to try and start at least chipping away at that unemployment number. So the economy is stable. The rand's had some strengthening over the last couple of months, but that's mainly been on the back of the weakness in the US dollar. And at the same time, you've had some stability in terms of inflation and the like. Financial markets, on the other hand, have been driven by, firstly, global financial markets have been running phenomenally over the last few months. But remember also, the mix of the companies in the JSE has changed also dramatically over the last 20 years. So more and more, a big representation of the companies in the JSE are largely global or multinational companies. For example, the biggest company in the JSE that makes up the two biggest companies that's listed that make up in excess of 10% of the JSE is Naspers and Prosus. Their business is largely Tencent to a large extent, and also other internet-related company, but Tencent, which is a Chinese company, that makes up and that's been a strong performer in terms of the share price over the last year or so, last couple of years, and that's obviously propelled the JSE. Secondly, you've had very strong performance also coming through from many of our resources companies over the last couple of months. Gold has been a phenomenal performer over the last 2 to 3 years. So the likes of Anglo Gold Ashanti, Sibaya Gold, Sibanye, Goldfields, their share prices are up phenomenally, but it's been on the back of a strong gold price. And also, majority of these companies now, a major part of their mining and the like is done outside of South Africa. Again, another important issue. The one way on the mining side has done phenomenally, was done very well in the last few months, and still has a big part of the operations in SA is the platinum miners. So whether it's Amplats or not, they call a new name now because they listed Valdera, and then you've got Impala Platinum and Northern and the like. So they have least now, as platinum prices has picked up and the like, the share prices have done very well, and it's obviously so the JSE has done very well, but it may not be a proper reflection of how South African companies and how the South African economy is doing or has done over the past year. Whereas the domestic companies, whether it's the banks, the retailers, some of them are doing relatively well. The banks have had a really, really strong run over the last few years. And the fact that now the Reserve Bank has cut, again, interest rates this past week by another 25 basis points, again, it's good for the economy because it allows those that are in debt and also allows a bit more activity in terms of funding and financing. So that, again, where the banks should continue to do okay. The retailers are relatively okay, as in there's two parts to it. The clothing retailers, it's still a tough situation. You look at the likes of Woolies Clothing. Or you look at Truworths and the Fushini Group and the like, they are going okay, steadily doing well. But the value retailers like the Mr. Price and the Pepco, they're doing very well because again, it's still tough out there, and consumers are still looking for value for their buck. So for $100, they want to get still a shirt or a T-shirt and the like. Whereas you're going to sometimes maybe a Woolies clothing or other higher branded you're not getting the same value for it. Whereas the Mr. Price and the Pepcos and the Ackermans, they're giving you still that value, and they're doing pretty well in this environment. The food retailers are doing relatively well. ShopRite is still the king in the food retail business, and they're doing pretty well. And at the same time, though, Pick n Pay, who has been under massive pressure over the last decade or more, under now Sean Summers, has slowly starting to turn around. First time we've seen this when they reported recently. First time we've seen positive growth, like for like positive growth for Pick n Pay in a long time. And Sean Summers is a veteran in terms of the retail industry, and you can see some of the stuff he's been doing in terms of closing non-performing stores. But that means also it has an impact. Now, while we talked about the past, looking forward, this rates impact, this tariff impact that has come through is going to impact, unless in the next, for a few weeks, they're still talking about potentially. I mean, the Switzerland president just flew in and had a talks with Trump to try and see because they've been impacted with 39% tariffs on their exports. So there's still a possibility, but whether it'll happen and when it'll happen, we don't know. But if 30% remains, our automotive sector and the agricultural sector is impacted. And potentially 30,000 jobs, at least within the next 6 to 12 months, will be impacted. So it's going to be a big impact, particularly the Eastern Cape. And that's where the big challenge is. And the president is talking about a support desk and trying to come. How effective will be, we're not sure. But I think the private sector is working behind the scenes and trying to see if they can address it and try and help where they can. But the fact of the matter is, it still remains a challenge. To give you one example, there's a company called, let me get that name, in the Eastern Cape. It's called Gendermark Automation, based in Gqeberha. They lost, just on the back of this over the weekend, they've lost an order now for 750 million rands. This is just one automation. So this company is involved they build machinery and software for the automotive sector. This is just one company that employs a couple of hundred people that's now lost a big contract on the back of this. And that you could be more stories of that happening with whether it's Mercedes-Benz and the like, that's going to happen. So it is a big impact. I think that is the biggest risk at the moment for us in the next 6 months or 12 months in terms of the economic impact and the fact that particularly certain provinces will be badly impacted. And the one that stands out is obviously the Eastern Cape, but the Western Cape as well, especially from a citrus perspective, will have an impact as well. And some of our beef producing provinces as well will also have a related impact as well. So I think we are in a if the tariffs was not there, I would have said, we're chugging along and we could still show maybe some positive growth. Unfortunately, if tariffs remain at 30% and it continues for a period of time, the economy will see an impact in terms of GDP growth and job loss. Unemployment levels will obviously rise on the back of that there. So I think, Yunus, it's a tough environment, as in there are some outside challenges which is obviously impacting the country, and there has to be some bold decisions being made by government and the private sector to try and alleviate some of the challenges. The earlier in the program, the whole focus was around service delivery. I mean, it's just ridiculous that the impact in terms of whether it's corruption or mismanagement or just poor skills that are in place that is impacting. I mean, the mayor of Joburg has been asked now by the Minister of Finance to explain 24.4 billion of wasted Johannesburg funds. And he's been given 14 days to address it. And if there's no proper explanation to address whatever, the Minister of Finance is looking to cut back in terms of funding for Johannesburg on the back of that. So I think now slowly it seems that you heard President Ramaphosa talking about holding municipalities accountable, and now the minister. Maybe there's now a lot more added pressure because of these external factors that are impacting us. That hey, we need to now focus on addressing our internal own goals, which has hampered us dramatically and badly for a number of years. Let's focus on addressing some of these issues here, because now we're getting it from all sides. Not only domestically our challenges, but now also these external forces are, and this is a bit more within our control. What is within our control, let's focus and address it and nip it in the bud. And that's what they need to focus on. And I think if there's a lot more now, hardness and push towards addressing the corruption. This weekend, last week we just talked about that IDT CEO and the like of 800 odd million. And what Daily Maverick produced this morning, a video showing the CEO and somebody else giving a bag of cash of 60,000 rand to the journalists to try and squash this. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And unfortunately, this is what we faced with. We have to address it, try and get the right. We've got the skills. Make no mistake, we do have a lot of skills also in the country that we can utilize and tap it and place them into key positions and important positions to turn it around. But we must have the willpower to say, those appointments that are not performing, sack them and replace them with the right skills and provide them with the necessary resources. The budget impasse was obviously one of the big sort of rocky roads, if you can call it that. But I think the NC is also, and in the NEC, they've talked about that they may look outside of the GNU to align and discuss with parties. Just one point I want to highlight, and this is just about what South Africa's been through now over since democracy, and potentially things that they can do in terms of where we can improve going forward as a country, economically, politically, and the like. So Moletsi Mbeki, which is the our former President Thabo Mbeki's brother, he's got views which sometimes may not sit right with many people, but he does come up with certain points and certain ideas which you think out of the box, and he comes up with things with him. So he delivered a paper recently at F.W. de Klerk Foundation's conference on achieving an inclusive economy. And a couple of key points, and I'm not going to go through all of it, but just 2 or 3 key points he highlighted. One thing he highlighted, he said, overhaul our education system. One of the key hindrances and the hamstringing the South African economy has been what the education system has done over the last 30 years. He says from where we were to where we are now, we're now sitting at 132 out of 169 countries globally in terms of the quality of our education system globally. He says overhaul that, get it to where the education has a meaningful impact in terms of graduates coming into the economy. Secondly, South Africa historically gave example of South Africa and the US over 150 years where they were both similar, and they had to say, but the ones we evolved into becoming the largest economy in the world. The one is the largest in Africa, but still by a mile. Per GDP per capita, one is $6,000, the other is $8,000. He says one of the things South Africa can do is, because we were over-reliant on minerals and resources, is to focus on industrial modernization. And that means incorporating areas such as digital and fourth industrial revolution, and it can be done. But to do that, you need to have policies that promotes it, policies and incentives that can promote that type of economy and that can drive, and that will lead to employment and the like. And the third one I just want to highlight is that we've had in the last 20, 30 years, a massive amount of urbanization that's taking place in South Africa. Gauteng. Gauteng's gone from, if I look at it, there was an article I read for last week or whatever. There was an article showed Gauteng went from, in the last 20 years, from 9 million to 16 million population over 20 years. That's why the infrastructure and the like is buckling under it, because they can't control that. Moletsi is talking about drop an urbanization plan for South Africa where there's a bit more control in terms of how you see flow of people between the rural and urban, and also develop a strategy for the rural areas so that it makes it attractive for people to stay there, develop and creating employment in those areas, and also developing those parts of the country as well.